Hi folks, it's Gregory here, Not Only Code. Welcome to the fourth and last episode of the mini video series about getting your new job. In collaboration with Orange Quarter, we led you through the process of application, through the talking to HR, through doing the coding interview. And today I'm going to talk to Matthew Barr, who's a sales manager at Orange Quarter. And the topics that we are going to cover include negotiation, choosing the offer that you want to accept, and dealing with rejection and getting feedback from the companies that didn't make an offer to us. Let's do it. Matt, I wanted to say thanks for coming, but we are in your office, so...
Yes,
so
I didn't know how to
here.
start it either, to be honest, but yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing as a sales manager?
So I think it's a bit of a deceiving title sometimes, sales manager. So what I do is work with the 20 consultants we have doing recruitment here in the Amsterdam office, looking after day-to-day process, managing candidates, working with clients. So hopefully have some useful input on what we're talking about this morning.
Okay, so let's start with the moment that the company calls me as a candidate and say, hey Greg, we are very happy with the interview, we will be making an offer.
Okay.
What should I say? Should I say, all right, I'm joining you? Or should I say, yes, thank you, let's talk the numbers?
Playing it cool. Okay, I think it really depends on the person we're talking about here. If you get to the end of an interview process with a company and you love the company, you love the offer, everything's perfect, I personally don't see a reason to not accept the job on the phone. However, I would say that what we would usually recommend, double check the offer, clarify it, thank the company for giving the offer, but do just make sure and see everything tangible in black and white, whether it's an offer email, an offer contract, just so you know exactly what you're looking at and you can check everything that's in writing.
And what you told me before is that it rarely happens that the numbers appear just in the end of the process, that it's the best if the candidate knows what is more or less the range of the salary and if the company knows what is the expectation. So when should that thing happen? When should both sides start to understand what are the possibilities there?
It would be very peculiar to go the entire way through an interview process and only talk about expectations versus offer at the end of a process. You've probably seen it, and I've seen it before as well, where to have this surprise and mismanagement of expectations at the end of a process can lead to this massive waste of time for everybody. So you go through the process and you're disappointed, company goes through the process and didn't understand what you were expecting the whole time. Something we definitely try to encourage is that there's a very clear setting out of expectations from both the candidate and the company at the start of a process. And to be honest, as much as possible, going back through that process and sanity checking that to make sure everyone is still very much aligned on what this is going to be.
All right, so a tricky question then. Why don't companies put the salary range in the job description if it's beneficial for everyone to know it very early?
Let's say you put a salary range of 60,000 euros to 75,000 euros. Most of the people who apply for that job are going to only see 75,000 euros.
Right. Yeah.
And that's okay. For you to want to negotiate and get to the top of that salary banding is okay. But I think the reason companies are pulling back from it is because to set this expectation of here's the top of our bracket at the very start means that you have a pool of candidates who typically are only interested in getting to that number.
Got it.
And that might be the top of the banding for engineers you have doing that job already. So what you have then is a group of potentially fantastic employees who are only seeing the very top of the salary banding they could join at. And you know, as a manager, to have someone come in from the outside and go straight to the top of the banding you have for your engineers, it causes a whole load of problems internally potentially. There's also a situation here where you can potentially cut off people that you may want to hire. It may be that you have this range in your head as a company of here's where we think the market is, but actually the person you really, really want then doesn't apply to the job because they think, oh, well, you know, it's about the same as what I make at the minute. I'd really like a little bit more. And then you never get to interview the person who you're like, that's the guy we actually want. That's the girl who's right for this job. There's a tirade of problems with it, but I don't think it cuts away from the fact transparency about what you expect as a candidate, as an individual, before entering the process should be set out clearly at the start. And the company should either be in agreement with being prepared to pay that or not in agreement. And then you can kick forward from there.
And what to do if the company tells me that they want to make an offer and they are asking me, what do you want? Like the common knowledge is that whoever says the number first loses. So the company asks you and you need to be prepared to tell them either a certain number or say, hey, I would rather to see what you have to offer.
If you are both talking about numbers for the first time at the end of an interview process, then that can definitely creep in where whoever says the number first loses, as you put it. I am of the belief that at the start of an interview process, the candidate should set out their expectation. This is more or less where I am. I'm trying to get to here. And the company should either say, yes, that's good for us, or no, it's not good for us. I think if, for both sides, if you're only really starting to talk about expectations either towards the end or at the end of a process, more often than not, I see that going badly. One of the overarching points I wanted to get out of the discussion today was I think throughout an interview process, we want to make sure that we're going back and checking that everyone's expectations are still aligned so that by the time we get to an offer, there's no nasty surprises for either side.
Let's say that we know more or less the expectations and I'm getting an offer. What if we are talking, let's say, I don't know, 50 to 60,000 euros a year. And this is the range that we've been talking about through the whole interview process. And now the company gives me an offer and they say 52. And I'm like, okay, so that this is within the range, but I think I'm worth a bit more. So can I just tell the company, okay, how about 56?
Again, this is a politician's answer, Greg, apologise. I think it really depends on what's important to you in the offer. Right, something that I feel like we end up talking about a lot in the recruitment industry when it comes to salaries is really the minimal difference sometimes between certain numbers. For example, if we're talking about an offer of 52,000 a year, like you said, in a range of 50 to 60, is the difference between 52 and 55 going to be the difference between you accepting the job? But I also understand the mental side of accepting a job. Sometimes you have a certain figure in your head that you know you're going to be happy with, but this is actually often the point where I would encourage people to step back and look at the whole offer. So let's say they've offered you 52,000 for a year's salary. Is there other parts of the offer that matter to you maybe a little bit more than 3,000 euros a year? Maybe there's things around training and development budget. Maybe there's things around flexibility with working from home. I would always encourage people to look at the offer as a whole and not just the number that's going to be in their bank account.
And what about the other parts of the offer? So you mentioned that we shouldn't be looking just at the basic salary. What are the things that we should be paying attention to?
Especially with the corona situation at the minute, something that's becoming more and more prevalent is the flexibility people have with their home office, with working from home, with time in the office, which was becoming quite a big negotiation point before coronavirus anyway, I feel like. But I think now that's definitely something that's on the table much more to talk about. There's different areas as well. I mean, travel expenses are regularly covered here in Amsterdam. We look at annual bonuses, look at stuff around team performance. There's a host of different things that companies offer as the full package. And again, this can change wildly from company to company, and something again that's maybe very relevant for Orange Quarter is stocks, shares, buy into part of the business, because we're working with so many scale up and startup businesses as well.
Okay, so let's say that I have multiple offers and one of them is just fixed salary, the other is salary and a bonus, and yet the other includes stock options.
Yeah.
How do I compare the offers that are so different when it comes to, the numbers? Like when you have stock options, it's very difficult to compare it against fixed salary.
Definitely. And this is where, again, it becomes so person dependent. Perhaps if I'm a little bit older, married man with a wife and kids and a house, perhaps for me it's very, very important to have a very healthy fixed salary with a good pension and maybe some bonus options at the end of the year if I do a good job. If I'm maybe a younger expat in the city, single, living that lifestyle, perhaps it's more exciting, perhaps it's more prevalent for me to take a job with a startup who are offering me a buy into the business. If the business does well, I do well. Really, this is going to be something that, like you said, as an individual where you want to work, but you do also have to bear in mind your lifestyle and what's going to actually work for you on the day to day.
What about the annual bonuses? So I have I don't like annual bonuses personally, because I think on one hand, if they are like company performance based, then how much I can contribute to my bonus, right? I could do nothing the whole year, just avoid getting fired, and I will still get the same bonus as everyone else. If they are individual performance based, that's very arbitrary because it depends on your manager. So what is your opinion about how should we treat bonuses? Should we count them as a fixed part of the salary or kind of discount their value?
It can wildly differ. If you're someone who sees yourself next 2-3 years moving with that company, sticking with them with a long-term future, and you believe you as an individual contributor or the business is only going this direction, and you know your performance, you back your performance, I can see how having a really nice bonus structure is going to be a massive benefit to you. But again, this is where it really comes down to you as an individual knowing what you're comfortable working with. There's so many variables, it becomes very hard to nail your colours to the mast about whether a bonus is something you should care about or not. And it's something you as an individual need to sit down and maybe do a little bit of work on to figure out, okay, what does this bonus mean to me? Is it worth it in the long run? And how does it fit in the overall picture against everything else we just talked about a minute ago?
Okay, let's go back for a moment to dealing with multiple offers. What candidates compare besides the salary, besides the paid time off, when they decide on which company to join? So do people pay attention to technology, to the industry? From your experience, what matters to people?
In my experience, and we talk about it so regularly in here, is I don't feel like it's very normal for people to move jobs for money unless they are really, really taking a massive pay increase to go somewhere. I feel like it's not very regular for people to decide I'm going to move jobs for the money.
Oh, that's very interesting.
I think a lot of the time there is a much more significant underlying reason that is either pushing them from their current company or pulling them towards
something like toxic culture or bad management on one side, or like very interesting technology or very interesting industry on the other. That's what you mean?
I think something we've been talking about again a lot recently is if you truly feel like what's pulling you to another job is 3,000 euros a year more, you're a manager, go and ask your manager for it. Probably they'll talk about it with you and come to a solution. I find very, very rarely once you get into it, it's very rare that money is the actual motivator for people to leave one job and go to somewhere else. Usually it will be cooler product, cooler technology, maybe not in love with their current company anymore, changing things at their current company. There's any host of reasons, and I mean, I could list hundreds here, and you probably hundreds more, of why people decide to leave a job. And I really think money is so close to the bottom of that list, 95% of the time.
Yeah, that kind of overlaps with my experience. But then whenever I read about how to get to a certain level of salary that you would like to have, right? There is certain, like, when you're starting, you're at the kind of lower end, and then after a few years you can get to a point after which, like, the higher salary doesn't make a big difference to you anymore. But to get to that point, people say the best way is to change a job once every 12 to 18 months because when you change a job, you can get like 10% bump. Maybe if you are getting a higher position, 20 or something. And if you're staying, you will get the annual raise of 3%, which will be equivalent to like 20 euros a month. So that's not something that you're really interested in, right?
I think we have a strange culture in Amsterdam, though, where there is almost an expectation every time someone moves job that they will make more money.
All right.
There is almost this preconception. I'm moving jobs, I'm entitled to more money. And the longer I work in Amsterdam for and the more processes I see, I'm really starting to push back against that a little more because, there's a certain way to climb up the salary ladder. But also at a certain point, let's say you as a manager reviewing a CV, if you see this guy or girl who's moving jobs every 12, 18 months for the last few years, I'm sure it would raise eyebrows on your side about how much use am I going to get out of this person? How long can I rely on having them here? There's a fine balance to be had between changing jobs, what you expect from changing jobs, and how many times you can do it on a short period before managers, recruiters start sort of looking at your profile and saying, how long can I rely on having this person?
That's true. Yeah, definitely. Yes. So I have nothing against people changing jobs a couple of times because there are multiple reasons. Like, in one job, the manager doesn't like you. In the other job, they tell you that you will be working on something interesting and then they give you legacy code to deal with. But you're right that if it happens 5 times in a row, then I'm thinking, okay, probably in my company you will also stay only 1 year. So then doesn't make sense for me to hire you, to train you, to pay the commission to a recruiter and to go through the whole process if you're going to leave after 1 year. And do you think, or do you see people actually accepting pay cuts or the same money very often if they are drawn to another company, or still, even if they like the company, they say, okay, if they want me, they need to give me something more?
People, I don't think, would believe the amount of times that we work with engineers who take a pay cut or the same money to work somewhere they actually want to work.
Okay.
And it's crazy because obviously there's a lot of expats work in the Netherlands, and you can get these wild expectations about your market value. But sometimes you move job once or twice and you can kind of define a little bit better in your head of, okay, this thing really matters to me. This kind of culture really matters to me. This sort of business, this sort of manager, the location of this office, these things actually all really matter to me. I have seen people take some pretty extreme pay cuts to work somewhere they actually want to work on something they believe in or with circumstances that suit them. I have seen people turn down job offers for a lot more money to take the same as what they make now, because there's all these other pieces to the puzzle that fit into the picture here before you decide. The thing is, where do you want to wake up and go to work every day? Where do you want to spend your time, and what's that worth to you versus what's in your bank account? That's the kind of age-old dispute, I suppose.
All right, yeah, I totally agree. For a couple of weeks, I was commuting daily between Rotterdam and Amsterdam, and this is just 40 kilometers, but it actually took me around 90 minutes to get door to door one way, and then 90 minutes back. And the trains got delayed, something got stuck. So sometimes I was waiting somewhere for an hour, and eventually it wasn't sustainable for me. Even though the salary bump was really nice, the commuting, it's 3 hours a day more, which means 15 hours. So it's like another part-time job, right? So I totally agree that there are things that matter more than bank account.
And let's take commuting for a second, right? As a point of conversation. Some people are absolutely fine with commuting. Some people use the time to read a book or pick up on emails, or can even do some work on the train, and that's okay, and that works for them. Me as an individual, as much as I love the Netherlands railway system, there's only a certain amount of time I can spend on a train, no matter how much money you're paying me. And I do think, again, this is where, sorry to repeat myself, but this is where it comes down to you as an individual. Are you someone where being home in the evening to your wife and kids or your partner or whatever is something that truly matters to you? Are you someone who getting home at 7, 8 o'clock in the evening, but you love the company and you wake up every day and you're on that train and you're like, yes, I'm going to work for this company? There's so many different personalities and different expectations and different companies that what may not have worked for you and definitely wouldn't work for me might be absolutely fine for some other people, and vice versa. So it's just, these are all this is why we could spend 5-6 hours talking on this topic. There's just this never-ending different sphere of factors to consider for everybody, and that's I suppose what we're always trying to manage, is that individual person. What is this collection of things that make up the bigger picture for them to make them happy where they're going to go and work?
Let's say that I negotiated the offer with the company, we're both happy. I go to my boss and say, I'm leaving. And they say, we'll give you 20% raise.
Yes,
What
the counteroffer.
Should I ever accept counteroffer? Have you ever seen someone accepting counteroffer and be happy with that?
Is there a specific camera I should look at here to address the nation?
This one.
Never ever accept a counteroffer. Do not do it. It's talked about a lot, right? I think especially with the coronavirus at the moment, so common for companies to hear that great engineers leaving. Oh no, how do we keep them? How do we make this person stay here? There's a lot of points around this, but two main things I want to cover. A counteroffer is never a long-term solution for the company or for the individual. The company knows that person's going to leave eventually already anyway.
Of course.
They've already set their stall out,
Yes.
that they're going to leave at some point. It's putting a band-aid or a plaster over the problem for a few months. That person also knows eventually they're going to leave. And to be honest, this is the thing that's always talked about. If it takes me going and handing my resignation to you for you to change my working conditions and to offer me something better, what does that say about the relationship I have with that company? I'm actually, sorry to turn the tables, but I'm really interested to hear your perspective on it as a manager as well, and how I'm sure you've experienced it from both sides and been in those situations. What do you think about it?
I've seen people trying to keep the employees, but I don't know if it's a good thing to say, but from my perspective, it looks pathetic. If you're, I've seen people scrambling to like, oh, what we can do, maybe we can give him some, I don't know, some bonus, maybe we can give a raise. It's like, where have you been since that person started looking for a new job? Like, it's not something that you cannot notice. You can notice.
Agreed.
If you have one-on-ones with employees, they will not tell you, hey Greg, I'm looking for a new job, or hey, I might be leaving soon. No, they will tell you like, this project is actually getting boring. Is there something new happening? If people are unhappy, you can notice that. Also, I think I would not accept a counter offer because I'm already past certain threshold. Like, if I have decided to go to another company, now going back and saying, okay, I will stay here.
Let's say that you accept a counter offer and you've been through the entire exciting process of interviewing somewhere else. You've got an offer from somewhere else. Human beings get excited about that.
Yeah.
And then you accept the counteroffer, and Monday morning you go back to your usual desk
Yes.
with slightly better working conditions.
Yes.
And you pick up your coffee and you're like, oh, I'm still here.
Nothing changed.
And nothing's really changing.
Yeah.
That I just think once you've been through the process of really exploring somewhere else,
Yes.
and then you decide to stick it where you're at, exactly what you said, it's a very short-term solution.
Yes. All right. Now let's talk a bit about the other side of the outcome of the interview process, which is, I'm sorry, but we found someone else. We will give an offer to another candidate.
Yeah.
Now, of course, that's always disappointing, but you can still get something from that. You can get a feedback about what could have been done better, where did I fail. But from my experience, companies often avoid giving feedback. And I want to understand first why. Like, we've been together for a couple of interviews. Like, you know what I think about the company. Why don't you tell me why I failed?
Yep.
And how can I ask for a feedback if the company just says, thank you for the interview, we are going with other candidates?
It can be very dependent on the size and circumstances of the company. If you're talking about getting real tangible feedback from a massive business, sometimes that can be difficult, and they potentially, from a PR perspective, will only want to give certain specific feedback. Again, this is where working with an intermediary can be really strong, because something we're always pushing for and trying to make sure people understand is positive and negative feedback. And it's not always nice to tell someone negative feedback. I've had countless phone calls in my career where I have to share negative feedback with someone, and the call's not always pleasant from both sides.
Absolutely.
But like you said, it's something we try and push for a lot, because if you are number 2 or number 3 and you're not getting the job offer, you've spent a lot of time talking to that company, forming an emotional attachment, positive or negative. You want to know, why not me? You know, we can talk a lot about how professional companies should be, but at the end of the day, sometimes it might just be in an interview, someone didn't like you.
That's true, yes. But this happens early, right? It will not happen after the last round. That someone says, "Oh, okay, we didn't."
You'd like
or
to
does
hope
it
not.
happen?
You'd like to hope not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would like to detect the differences or the culture fit mismatch early in the interview process, not in the end.
Correct. And it can just be a case sometimes that you were great, but someone else was better. That's just,
of course, yes,
the world sometimes. But also, there should still be some degree of tangible feedback a company can give you as to where that person came off better. And maybe it's something that you just say, well, that's just my personality, or that's my skill set, is the way it is. Or maybe depending on who you are, that is something you take and say, okay, I'm going to go and work on this as professional development and do whatever with the feedback. But it is very important to get. Not all companies are forthcoming with it. Yeah.
I know that companies avoid giving feedback because of the legal reasons.
Yeah.
Like, there is a chance that they say something that people might say, okay, it's a discrimination, I'm suing.
Yep.
Is it common in practice?
I would say, thankfully, with quite a lot of our clients, they're relatively forthcoming with feedback. Some will give more PC feedback than others. Others will be quite straight shooting, say, listen, here's why we didn't like the guy or girl. I think we are quite lucky to work with a lot of companies who see the value in giving feedback throughout the process, and it's something we obviously encourage them to do. But again, it just gives them a better image overall in the end up. I know if I went for an interview process with a company and the only feedback I got was you weren't a cultural fit.
What does it mean really, right? Like, what is a culture that they have that
I'd have a worse impression of that company than a company who told me, listen, Matt, technically you weren't right on this, 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 and this. We loved you as a person, but honestly, your Python scripting skills were just a little bit off versus the person we wanted to go with.
Yeah.
That for me is still disappointing, but at least I know what the thing is, rather than just wildly guessing about who I wasn't a cultural fit with. That's just as bad as saying nothing.
And do you notice that the companies are maybe harder on negotiation right now, especially with the more junior or mid-level developers because of this situation, or do you notice like that there is no change in their attitude? Like, are they using the situation to maybe not lower salaries, but just be more strict and less flexible?
If they are doing it, I haven't noticed it.
All right.
I definitely haven't seen that as a result yet. Maybe that changes, but I think I can only speak to the clients and companies that we work with, and I've definitely not noticed a shift in attitude towards negotiation. Perhaps a shift in priority and what they're looking to hire, but when it comes to the actual negotiation phase, so far I've not spotted anything like that.
All right, that's good to know that at least on that part it's not getting worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Come back to me in 6 months.
Okay, I will. Matt, thank you so much. I think it's been very valuable. I learned a lot. I think that everyone who watches this video will get some information, some insight about how to negotiate the offer.
Hopefully.
And that it's not only about money, it's about the whole package, including the commuting time to the office after we go back to the office.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I hope that everyone will enjoy this video.
Thank you for having me.